Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Qweerty Q&A. These have been a lot of fun the past couple of months, so I'm really excited to have my next guests. My name is Chandler Poling. I am the Vice President of Qweerty Gamers. I go by Torin LA on Twitch. And anyways, it's really fun. We've had some voiceover actors in the past, and now we have some voice actors coming up with us again. I love voice acting. I love animation. I love video games and all the emotion that voice actors bring to these projects. So we have a couple of guys that have worked on projects such as the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Demon Souls, Fullmetal Alchemist, Power Rangers Megaforce, and so much more. Please welcome Austin Lee Matthews and Mark Allen Jr.
Hello, everyone.
Well, hi.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. It's good. It's good. It's pandemic. We're in the best spirits we can be in.
As every email opens up in these interesting times.
In these trying times.
I have to say, like, when I get emails that are like, I hope you've been well as can be expected. I'm like, okay, enough. We can at least pretend to be a little normal. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us at Qweerty Gamers. We love the projects that you guys work on, so this is really exciting to talk about your work as voiceover artists. And I'm really going to just launch us into some questions like, were you big nerds growing up?
No, not at all. No, not at all. None of that here.
No?
Yes.
No,
yes.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
The biggest.
100%.
What were some of your big nerdy upbringings? What some fandoms that you were into growing up?
I was a huge Digimon fan. I was also a big Star Trek fan, but specifically Voyager. And gosh, what else at the time? I think that was mostly it as a kid. And the we'll call them the fandoms that I got involved in as time progressed increased exponentially. Firefly and just D&D as a whole, and just pretty much everything. If somebody talked about it, I've probably heard of it.
Yeah. And I grew up with Star Wars, a healthy diet of Star Wars, Pokemon, Digimon, basically every game console that wasn't a Sega console, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Final Fantasy, Austin, you're one of the characters in the new remake. Now you're gonna have to help me. Is it Roche or is it Roche?
It is Roche.
Roche. Thank you.
It is.
12 R's. Yeah.
It is more like 12 O's in the Japanese version.
Right.
It goes Roche in the Japanese version, but in the English version, it's just Roche.
Roche, yes. Yeah, because I've heard obviously both through the different languages, but Roche in the United States or English language. What was it like to play that role for you?
I had the biggest smile on my face for 3 days, and it was amazing because I was like, holy shit, this is happening.
Now, did you play the original Final Fantasy?
Eventually.
7.
I was more a fan of the movie. I liked Advent Children a whole lot. I remember one time watching Advent Children 3 times in one day. But I've seen it no less than 50 times.
Wow. Since
it came out. But then I did eventually play 7 the day after I started recording Roche. I went in on I believe on a Monday, and then I'm just like, you know what? It's on Game Pass. I'm gonna play it, and so I marathoned it in 32 hours and came back on Wednesday, and the director was just like, "So, how was your 3 days?" And I'm like, "Well, I beat Final Fantasy VII." He's like, "You hadn't played it 2 days ago." Yeah.
I love it. I love a good marathon, a video game marathon, where it's just up all night, play till your eyeballs hurt.
That's exactly how it was.
I know. I miss
don't
it
have time.
too. I know. I don't have time. I'm too busy, and I wish I could just do all-nighters. Mark, over to you. What about your love of Final Fantasy? I see you've got a poster behind you of Cloud, right?
I do from Advent Children. I also enjoyed the movie. In fact, that is the only reason why I bought a PSP. Because I bought a sales pitch that the only way to watch it was on UMD. And about a week after I got my PSP, they announced it was coming out on DVD. So they got me.
Yeah.
But actually, my favorite Final Fantasy has always been Final Fantasy X. I think the first one I played was 6, and then 4, and then I played a little bit of 7, but I never finished it. I played a little bit of 8, but I never finished that. I had never played 9, and the reason for that is because all of those were owned by friends or family members. So I only really played them when I was over. But 10, my mom got us for Christmas, along with a PS2. So I played that game excessively.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Everybody's ultimate weapons, and Waka had like 9,999 HP in Blitzball. So, just went wild with it. I really enjoyed it. I still maintain if they just make a Blitzball game, I will buy it and play it. I just Blitzball. Doesn't even have to have any of the characters in it. I will just play Blitzball till the day I die.
No, I'm trying to remember Blitzball. I remember the name of it, and I remember that Walker was a Blitzball player. But how does the game work?
It's like soccer and rugby combined, but also water polo. So they're like enshrined in this sphere of water, and you have to carry the ball from one side of the field to the other. People are allowed to tackle you, and there's all these special moves. You can apply effects like poison or withering to other people. There are special shots that you can do that make it easier to get into the goal. I got to a point where basically if I caught the ball on kickoff, I'd pass it to Titus and have him do eject shot from wherever he was on the field, and it would go in. So kind of abused the game a little bit, I think.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, well, let's talk. I mean, I want to talk about Final Fantasy all night because I'm a big Final Fantasy fan. But we should talk about voiceover work because I think it is a job that a lot of, especially nerds, dream to do because you get to voice or embody these amazing characters that you have either played or that you watch in Pokemon or whatever it may be. So, how did you get started, Mark, in voiceover?
Well, I was kind of a late bloomer as far as acting goes. My first acting class was technically musical theater in my junior year in high school. And then my senior year, I took acting 1 and got involved with an improv group. So improv was kind of my first foray into quote unquote real acting. And from then, after graduation, a friend of mine was attending college with Christina Valenzuela, or more colloquially known as Christina V. And she, my friend Elena, was talking to Christina about voiceover. And Elena knew that I had kind of been interested in it. I wanted to do movie promos. I don't have the voice for it, but that was what I wanted to do. And Elena was like, well, Christina does VO. Maybe you could talk to her about it. And so started talking about it with Christina. She kind of threw me to some online resources where I started doing research, joined a couple of community groups where I started doing radio plays and audio dramas and motion comics and just really kind of just took off from there. I think my jump from I'm interested in this to my first paid gig was about a year and a half.
That's amazing. Wow.
2007, I had my first paycheck for voiceover. And in 2008, I did my first anime. And
that's incredible.
Just kept going from there. It's been a weird kind of, I say weird. I've had probably an average career. I've had to fight in the trenches, so to speak, for the entirety of my career. It's only been recently that I've been really starting to get some kind of bigger name opportunities, which I'm eternally grateful for. But just that's, the majority of actors, I think, kind of run the route that I have done, which is that we don't wake up and go, I'm going to be a voice actor. And then 2 years later, we're in everything. Those are definitely the exception, not the norm. So,
yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Christine V. Now, her name is very familiar to me, but since we gave a shout out to her, tell us a little bit about her.
Well, I couldn't possibly describe her better than she can describe herself. But she is an extremely talented, multifaceted performer. She's a singer. She used to do cosplay. She's a big anime fan. You might know her if you watched. I'm blanking on names right now.
Madoka Magica.
Thank
Oh,
you.
great! Yeah, I love that.
The Miraculous Ladybug,
Yes.
among other things.
This is why Austin's here, because he has a better memory than I do.
Yeah, her name sounds familiar, but for some reason I remembered her as a Sailor Scout, but I think I was misremembering.
Yes, she was Sailor Mars.
Oh, she's Mars.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was right. Yeah, she's Sailor Mars.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. Well, awesome. Nice shout out for her. She's not here. You guys are. So let's focus on you. But I want let's
I
throw
will
the question.
happily perform for the rest of this Q&A as Christina V, if you like.
Yeah. Please. Over to you, Austin. How'd you get started in VO?
So I've kind of been doing voices my entire life. It was just like one of those things that just like always like was a thing that I enjoyed doing. I annoyed the shit out of my parents with it. I annoyed the shit out of my teachers with it. But all my friends were like, dude, you're really good at that. Like, you know, I'd like do impressions of Family Guy characters and stuff like that for everybody. And in high school, we all watched the awesome cartoons by Aaron Hansen. And we had those like basically memorized. And it got to the point where my friends were just like, dude, you should get into this. And I had been wanting to get into animation because of those cartoons. And so I'm just like, well, I'll just do all the voiceover for my own cartoons. And one day I decided, you know what? I just want to try and do voiceover. And so I looked up on YouTube, which is the worst place to look for auditions. And I found an audition for a machinima, and just decided to do it. And I booked 5 out of the 6 roles that I auditioned for.
Wow.
And then I'm just like, maybe there is something to this. And then the next year, I, did a voice acting competition and I didn't even place, but I got to meet Mark, who helped me make finals the next year. And then a couple years later, I booked my first studio gig. A few years after that, I booked my first named role. And then a couple years after that, I booked my first agent. So it's been a lot of fun.
I love that both of you guys really just kind of spawned into it. That you really are like, this is something that I want to do, and then you guys just kind of worked to it and made it happen. And I know that building a career takes time, but as far as breaking into the industry, you guys broke in relatively smoothly, so to speak, as far as getting your first gigs.
Yeah, I'd say pretty relatively.
I think a lot of that has to do with the time period.
Yeah,
Austin and I both kind of. We got in on ground level when the elevator still picked up passengers at the ground level.
Yeah.
Now the elevator is closed, so you have to take the escalator, but you have to take it from like the second story down lobby. It's a lot harder, I think, to get started on a more like a grander scale than it used to be. It's easier to get started on the indie scene than it used to be, but getting involved with studios or agencies is a little bit harder now than it used to be because there's just so many more voice actors because the world has become more accessible with the increase in technology, the availability of microphones and audio editing software being a little bit easier for people to understand and comprehend. Things have just gotten easier, which in turn makes it harder for people to really kind of stand out because it becomes this sort of this open marketplace where a lot of people are doing or selling the same thing. So it's a lot harder, I think, for people to stand out now than it used to be.
And we have a question from chat that I want to throw in here. It's from Kitty Cat Gundam 81.
Amazing name.
Yes, love that. What is your favorite roles, or what are your favorite roles that you've performed as?
All of them.
Yeah.
Like it's a cheap answer, but like legit. Like, I look at a lot of the roles I've played as my children, which is kind of a weird way to look at it, I guess, now that I think about it and say it out loud. But in reality, it's kind of like every time a new role comes up, you have a new friend that you get to explore and somebody new that you get to spend time with. And so usually my favorite is whoever I'm with right now, which sometimes is more than one person. So it's really hard to answer that question.
No worries. Austin, do you have a way to answer?
They all live rent free in my head.
I like everything that I do, but there are some that are like more like personally important to me than others. Like Roche is deeply important to me. Arthur from Mystery Skulls is important to me. And like, you know, there's others that I'm just like, man, like, you know, I really had a lot of fun doing that, and the experience was fun, and like getting to be part of it was fun. Like one a lot more understated and not as many people know about that I love is Alus in the new Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise. Had a lot of fun with him. That just because like I grew up with Gundam Wing specifically. So that was a lot of fun, but it's stuff like that where I'm just like, man, I get to be part of this thing that I was part of, you know, growing up was, you know, just really special, you know?
Absolutely. We have a request from Warpath Dylan. If Austin says, can you do one of the cartoon voices from your childhood?
Oh gosh. Well, the first one I ever did was Steve Irwin with the crocodile hunter. I remember the first accent I ever taught myself was Steve Irwin. And so I'm just like, oh, get a look at this little beauty over there. Look at that little Sheila. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to wrestle her. You know, that was the first one I remember doing.
I would love to hop in on this. I don't have a lot of impressions. Austin is so much better at that than I am. But there's one that I have, and I just have to ask, are you a boy or are you a girl? Welcome to the wonderful world of Pokemon. I'm Professor Oak. This is a Pikachu.
Love it.
Lots of
gotten in trouble with that
of
voice.
Professor Oak with Mark. Yes, we have.
Oh, Professor Oak. Everybody loves him.
Everyone loves him until he attacks you to your core.
So speaking of all these different voices, you guys have voiced both anime and video games. So what's the difference? Like, how would you compare those two kind of gigs? What do they demand of you? How, you know, tell us about those two genres.
Well, with video game, it depends on the game because it can either be vastly different than anime or it can be almost identical. Final Fantasy VII was like a little bit of both. So with anime, you got to be very, very specific about the timing and the lip flaps and all this stuff. And you have to do that while still focusing on the acting. With a lot of video game freedom of being able to like, just do it wild and, do it however you would do it. But with stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, we had stuff, but we were also dubbing to picture for it. So like I'd say about half of it was dubbed to picture and half wild. So it really depends on the game because you might get a lot of overlap otherwise.
There's also now this move for voice actors to also do mocap performance. So you're not only voicing your character in a game, but you are also they're capturing your facial expressions and your body movements, and that you may not be the model for that character. They may have had somebody else that they scanned to use as the model for that character, but your motion data and your facial expressions are being applied to that model. So now, because of that and the advent of that technology, voicing for games has become a little bit more involved as well on the physical side. Versus, specifically with anime, I find it a little bit more technically difficult, having to match flaps with a specific timing. You tend to have situations where you might be the only voice you hear because other people may have not recorded for those scenes yet. And so you don't have a scene partner. You're kind of just bouncing off of the wall and the director and hoping that it all works in the end. Whereas like with video games, especially with mocap stuff, you definitely have a scene partner there, and that can go a long way towards helping your own performance.
Most of the time, yeah.
And does anime and video games both demand that kind of I don't know what you would call it, but where you just do a bunch of sound effects with your mouth? Because
Yes.
I know, like in video games, you have to do a lot of like
Yeah.
screaming, just scream takes or
Yeah.
whatever it takes.
I
Like,
think the difference there is that with video games, it's a catalog. So you kind of go in knowing, all right, I'm gonna have to do 4 I've been lit on fire death screams, and I'm gonna have to do 4 I'm being electrocuted sound effects. With anime, you kind of don't know what you're gonna have to do until it shows up. And the
Right.
director goes, okay, so let's go ahead and watch this scene. And you watch the scene, and your guy gets skewered with a sword and then bifurcated and then tossed into a fire. And the entire time he is screaming and reacting to what is happening. So you kind of go, cool, I guess we're doing this today. All right.
Yeah.
So it kind of catch you a little bit more off guard than with video games. I think when you do a video game, you're kind of prepped for at least 1 or 2 really vocally strenuous sessions where you're just going to die for 4 hours.
Yep.
Well, and other than dying, what other kind of sound effects are they demanding of you? Like grunts, or like if you're jumping off of a ledge or whatever. I feel like there's so many sounds that come out of characters when you're playing them.
The other day I auditioned. I didn't audition. I recorded for a thing where I needed to do 5 getting hit lightly, 5 getting hit medium, 5 getting hit heavy, 5 different jumps, 5 different lands, 5 different jumps and lands put into the same thing. Had to do a death scream. Had to do a bunch of stuff that I'm just like, okay, I'm tired.
I think the when it comes to I some people call it differently, but I've always referred to them as nonverbals, despite the fact that you're verbalizing. When it comes to nonverbals, you kind of run that gamut of every possible sound effect that you can think of. And that kind of just appears across voiceover. I think maybe promo work might be the only time that you don't really have to deal with that. Promo work and like industrial instructional videos. But anything that deals with animation or video games of any kind, I think you're going to run into something where, you know, you're playing a mouse that has to climb a table table mat to climb onto the table and get the cheese. And in all your other scenes, you might have dialogue, but for this particular scene, it's all just effort noises while you're climbing and grabbing the cheese and then running away as the humans walk into the room. And like, you know, you really have to jump into the mindset of that moment and think about what kind of noises is this character going to do when they experience this. You know, I like to refer to Link from The Legend of Zelda because everyone knows what Link sounds like when he makes his efforts, but no one knows what he sounds like when he talks. It's kind of the mystery of the character.
Mhm.
So it's a similar thing with every character. You have to know, like, okay, when he does this, what kind of sound is he going to do or make?
Yeah. Is it hiya
Yeah.
when you swing a sword?
It could be, or it could be fiat, or it could be ooh, or, you know, any number of sound effects.
The one that I've never gotten to do that I've always wanted to do is Toria!
They don't like that in English. It
I know
sucks.
they don't, but I
It's so
hear
fun,
it
but-
sometimes. I'm just like, I always want to do it.
Yeah.
Wait, what is that noise?
Toria!
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty common in Japanese properties to hear that as like an attack sound or something. But for some reason, when we dub stuff, they don't like it.
If you ever hear Roy in Japanese in Smash Brothers, he goes, "Humpty Toria!" Yeah. And so you hear the Toria there a lot.
I love it. A couple other questions from chat from Valkyrie. For Mark, what was your favorite part of voice acting for Gluttony in Fullmetal Alchemist?
So I was Gluttony for the live action movie, and my favorite part was definitely all the stuff that we did that people probably didn't notice or know was actually me. In almost every scene he's in, he's eating, and he might just be in the background or in a corner, or he's walking around eating something. And what they had me do was they would bring me these little like Dixie cups of fruit, of like pineapple and mango and stuff like that. And they'd be like, all right, so he's on screen for like 22 seconds. Just go ahead and, you know, just help yourself to some fruit and we'll just record it. And I was like, okay. So we spent like an hour of just recording me eating fruit and just being really juicy and gross about it. And it was weird because no one's ever wanted to hear me eat before. But it was fun because it was, you kind of get to just kind of and just like really just get gross with it. So it was a lot of fun.
Be a gross, heinous beast.
Yeah,
for an hour.
it was. I had like several moments where I'm like dripping juice down my chin, and I'm like, "Can I get a napkin, please?"
Mark made mess.
And same question from Valkyrie, but for Austin. What was your favorite part of voicing Roche?
Oh gosh. Well, for one thing, just being in the booth for Final Fantasy VII, having that moment of like, oh man, it's real. Oh. The really like a big thing for it was seeing the developing, like, I guess, relationship, quote unquote, between Roche and Cloud. Because like seeing Roche go from just like, like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna stop these guys too. Well, hold up now. Who's this? And so like seeing him like go through that in the bike in the motorbike race to like, him seeing Cloud again and just being just like, all right, let's fight. Come on. Come on. Come on, my friend. Just seeing that relationship develop was a lot of fun because I'm just like the whole time just like, I ship it a little bit.
We're here for it.
I weirdly ship it, but it was cool because it was cool kind of getting to like fight Cloud because this character that I grew up knowing who he was and then seeing him in action in Advent Children. And so it's just this moment I'm just like, I'm fighting Cloud. That's kind of amazing.
That is incredible. Another question from chat, again from Kitty Cat Gundam 81. Are there any roles that you refuse to take? Or have you turned down work?
Plead the fifth.
All right, fair.
The answer is yes, but I will not elaborate.
Fair.
Yeah,
I like my career.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, no, it's good to have integrity, obviously, and not take everything that comes your way. But you don't have to expand on that. On the topic of voiceover, what are some of the things you have to do when thinking about your throat care? Since your voice and your throat is your essential tool for making money, what are you guys doing to take care of it? What are some tips? Off stream we were talking about Mountain Dew, so
throw me under the bus from the start. Honestly,
of hydration.
Yeah. The biggest thing is just knowing your voice and knowing how it will react to certain foods and beverages. I don't think a lot of people take a lot of time to put stock into what their throat might feel like after they eat something. For example, most people, I won't say all, there are some people out there who are just blessed with amazing throats, but most people, don't take that out of context. Most people, it's probably not a good idea to eat spicy food before a voiceover session. It dries out your throat, it inflames your vocal cords, it makes things really scratchy and itchy. It becomes harder to do things without injuring yourself when you do that. And vice versa.
Same thing goes for like super acidic food like pineapple.
Right. Or, you don't want to eat a lemon before you go in. And then vice versa, a lot of people will tell you avoid dairy products like cheese and milk because those can create a buildup of mucus in your throat that will do the opposite where you'll be overhydrated. So there's an entire line of doctors who are experts in knowing how the throat works and how it reacts. And they have outlined over the years several, we'll call them guidelines for, the best kinds of things for vocal health that a lot of singers follow. And then there's tricks of the trade. There is a Chinese medicinal herbal supplement called Ninjam Pepa Koa, which I've never pronounced correctly in my life. But
We
most
just call
people
it
in the industry, yeah, Austin was going to say, most people call it Hulk juice. Because we all heard about it from Fred Tatasciore, who has voiced the Hulk in quite a few things. And it basically
Hulk
is a ton of honey and a ton of sugar. So it's not the greatest thing to have all the time. I take it in tea. Some people take it straight. I take it in hot water because it helps dilute it a little bit. But that does a good job of coating the vocal cords, maintaining mucous membranes, and keeping everything hydrated. There are certain types of teas that are really helpful and some that are really harmful. Anything with a high caffeine count is probably a bad idea because that's going to dry out your throat. Coffee will dry out your throat. There's a lot of people in this industry who drink a lot of coffee who will fight me on that and say, no, it's fine. But it's like, it's fine for you because you know your voice, right? So it's not like you can't drink these things. But if you do, it's helpful to know how that's going to affect your voice. I have tried quitting soda a couple of times, and every time I do, my voice changes. And so I have to be very careful about how I do that because it has affected roles that I was recording at the time. So it's lots of really weird little things that most people probably don't think about until you have to,
And then another thing is knowing your limit with stuff. Like other people have different like limits as far as vocal strain goes. I've got a very high limit. There's other people who have very low limits. Like I can do a 10 for 4 hours, but there's a lot of people who can only do a 10 for maybe 1 hour or 2. So,
That's me.
I wasn't gonna throw you under the bus.
I'll take it. It's a good bus.
Yeah. I remember one time that when you actually managed to push me beyond my limit when we were recording your radio play. And by the end of the night, like I sounded like this the whole time.
I felt really bad though.
But for like that entire week, like my voice was just dead. But in the car on the way home, I was extra tired because I'd been like basically like running in the booth. And I had blown out my voice. And so I'm just in the back of the car going like, how's it going, everybody? So I just started doing like the Barry White, hi, this is Barry White. Paul Quinn College cordially invites you this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, May 9th and 10th for the first fucking thing.
I felt really bad for that because I've if you haven't gotten it by now, Austin and I have known each other for a very long time. And
longer than 10 years now.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for his talent and ability. And I thought I knew his voice pretty well at the time because I'd had him do like blood curdling screams like 6 or 7 times and just be fine. And so when we brought him in for that session and he left and then he messaged me later and was like, man, my voice is gone. I was like, no, I broke him.
I was wrecked.
But it was
he
has a longevity that I definitely don't have. So when it comes to screaming and especially like video game dying and stuff, a lot of directors are really good about making sure that that's at the end of your session so they don't use you up before you get there. They'll check in with you and make sure like, hey, do you have anything else going on this week? Like, this is going to be really stressful. So if you have something else, we can maybe set another time to do that or something like that.
Well, and a good director will also take the time to be like in the middle of a session, like even if you're not at a 10, being like, hey, if you need a second, go ahead and take a swig of water and all that. And
checking in with you and asking you. Like,
a good director will check in.
I've had directors force me to take a break before because they're like, no, stop. You're not okay. Take a break. We'll be back in 5. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
And now is on the opposite scale of that, if the role or if the gig demands a scratchy voice or a bit of a damaged voice, do you find that or do they typically cast people that have more natural scratch in their voice, or what are your thoughts on that?
I have gotten cast for stuff that was like really scratchy. I've like really had to like force that. But they tend to schedule me for shorter sessions if I have to do that. Like the first time I remember getting cast as like a really scratchy dude. They only had me record that character in like 10-minute bursts. Because he was like in here.
Oh yeah.
Battle that I didn't know that I could find. And so they're just like, hey, so we're not gonna kill you. And I'm just like, thank you, sir.
Another thing that helps too is just knowing what you can maintain. It kind of this like ties into what we were talking about before, because if you can do that voice, that's great. You have to be able to do that voice for 4 hours.
Mhm.
Right? So if you're auditioning for a role that requires you to sound like this, you have to be sure you can sound like this for a very long time, because
Up
they're going
to
to
4
expect you to do
hours.
it for 16 hours, and if
Yeah.
you're done after 2, they're going to assume they made the wrong choice.
Yep.
And you can cause serious harm to yourself by trying to force yourself to keep doing that for longer than you can comfortably. So it's very important that you know safely what you can do and how long you can do it for before you even read for those kinds of characters.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Like,
You
well, the main scratchy guy I can think of is a Troy Baker or Troy Barker.
Troy Baker.
Troy Baker. Yeah.
Troy
I feel
Baker
like
does some scratchy stuff. Yeah.
I feel like he does a lot of scratch, or at least he did with
has-
Joel and Last of Us. And
There are some folks who have a really good texture that supports that. I'm getting there. I didn't always have it, but I have a little bit of a rasp to my voice now that I didn't have 5 years ago. That's made a lot of those voices easier for me. People who might have a history of smoking tend to have a better time doing those kinds of voices. Steve Bloom has a fantastic instrument
Right.
that lets him just not only do that textually, but like also like get way deep down in his
Jason
register
Marnocha.
to do it. Jason Marnocha is also very,
Yup.
very good at it. So there are some people who just have, like, I don't want to say they have that market cornered, but they have a good understanding of what they can do. And so they get more opportunities with that, which just in turn, increases their longevity, because the vocal cords are muscles. So the more you work them out, the stronger they get at it.
Yeah.
I think that's why I have rasp now that I didn't used to have. I think it's just because I've been doing this long enough that they kind of, it's like they've built up calluses almost, so that there's a little bit more rasp now as air goes through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So speaking of voice vocal cords as muscles, what are some of the exercises that you do to stay in shape?
Singing.
So, I don't really. I audition, and on the way to studios, I will sing opera, but I don't really do that like on a daily basis. Like my workout for the day tends to be auditioning,
Mhm.
but I don't do like the bow or the Stacy ba 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 butt fart.
All
I don't
right.
do that. I tend to, like, if I'm like driving to the studio, I'll like turn on the Nier soundtrack and just be like, "'Cause we're gonna shout it loud," and like flex my range a little bit that way. But
I
other than
think
that,
Austin and I are probably the worst people to ask this question of, because we both have a background in band as well. I played clarinet and bass clarinet. He was a brass player, so we've had to build up our tolerance for just suddenly exploding large amounts of air through our vocal
oh
cords.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, unless my allergies are really destroying me, there aren't a whole lot of warm-up exercises that I do. I will sing in the shower. And that's usually the extent of my warming up. Or singing in the car on the way to the studio, sometimes in the character's voice, but usually just in my own, just to help kind of shake up any holes in my range for that day.
Mhm.
That's about it. We're not great poster children for warm-ups.
Well, speaking of singing and band and everything, I know you guys are both involved in music. So I was curious about your kind of the music side of your careers, or what you are trying to do musically. Mark, I was saying earlier off cam that your website says your music is coming soon. So I want to know what your music is. And Austin, yeah, I would love to hear more about kind of what you guys are doing in the realm of music.
For me, my first big venture as far as an entertainer was DJing. I was a DJ for about 5 or 6 years. I was with a major promotional group for 3 of those years.
Major promotional group.
I was doing 3 internet radio shows a week. I was doing private parties, boat parties, playing at clubs in LA, mostly working with trance, but I also did top 40s. I also did drum and bass. I mean, I spent a lot of time as a DJ. And at the time when DJing was kind of stagnating because the majority of jobs that I was doing, we had a really hard time convincing people to pay me. A lot of the times my manager was paying me out of pocket, which was just not a good arrangement for me or him. And that was around the time that voiceover started to pick up a little bit for me. And so I kind of made the decision to follow voiceover and move DJing and music production to a hobby. And so since then, that was about 2011, 2012. Since then, I've kind of just done what suits my fancy. Mostly electronic dance music. Occasionally, I will make more orchestral or cinematic stuff.
I like your cinematic stuff.
Thank you. I taught myself guitar 3 years ago. I did piano lessons when I was a kid. I was in band for several years. I played clarinet and bass clarinet. And musically, I'm just kind of all over the place. About the only music I don't like is polka, and even then, Weird Al is the exception. So, there's probably something in any genre of music that I like. Just
Likewise.
part of that DJ mindset, I think, just really let me open to a lot of different kinds of sounds and just exploring how music affects people, and me in particular. I like living in my feelings when it comes to music. So while I have technical background and I have musical theory down, I ignore it a lot and just kind of go with what I think works and what sounds great in my head.
And you mentioned musical theater too, right?
Yes, yeah. I love musicals. Rent is probably my favorite musical of all time.
It's a great musical.
And yeah, no. So you called out my website. That's laziness on my part. But I have stuff up on SoundCloud. Occasionally, I post up stuff on my Twitter. Right now, I'm doing a song a day, counting down till Yule. Songs that bring me joy. So I've been sharing those. And
You've been doing really nice with that.
Thank you.
I've been really enjoying those.
I've been having fun. It's one of the first times that I've put up videos of myself singing on the internet and haven't been freaking out about it, because I've never considered myself a singer, but I've been working on it for years. So I'm a little bit more confident with it now. And it's been nice to be able to just share that and not worry about it.
Can we just have a little tangent here about Rent?
Yes, by all means.
I was recently re-listening to it, and I was listening to Benny, and I was like, Benny's offer actually isn't so bad.
He is the smartest person in that entire show. I've had arguments with people about this on both sides. I have a friend, I won't name him, but he hates Rent because he says they're all just entitled jerks. And he is right, but that's also kind of the point.
Right.
There's so much to Rent that's just like, man, like, if y'all would just be good people, none of this would have happened.
I know. My whole thing is his deal offering was to live rent free in a condo above a place where they had a virtual reality, whatever, cafe or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God.
All I had to do was ask Maureen to not hold her rally.
Yes, exactly. I was like, wait a minute. He was way ahead of his time, Benny.
He missed so many loopholes. He just didn't want them to have it there. They could have said, Maureen, have it next door. Or
yeah, exactly.
Maybe not tonight. Let's do it tomorrow. Like, there's so many different ways they could have gotten away with that and still made out with it.
Well, they had their artistic integrity to uphold, I guess.
Sure. All that art that they were making.
Okay, tangent over. Austin, tell us about your musicality, your music career.
So I've always been really affected by music. I grew up listening to my, lot of stuff that my dad had me listen to, like a lot of like rock and grunge and a lot of 80s stuff. I remember one of my earliest memories was this is gonna get a little heavy, was after my parents divorced. There was a period of time where I was really like upset that like I couldn't see my dad like every day. I couldn't see my dad every day or even every weekend. And so like I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go home. And so he's like, dude, kid, we got to go home. Come on, man. And then so he just started playing music, and he got to Cheap Trick. And the song I Want You to Want Me started playing, and I was just like, and mind you, I'm like 5 or 6. So like, I'm like very, very young, but something about that song just really like, made me happy. And like, so he played the song over and over again on the way home. And so that was like my earliest memory of music. And then in elementary school, I decided to play trombone in elementary school band. In high school, I decided I wanted to contribute to the band in some way by writing music, and I never did. But I started composing music in high school, and then I upgraded my programs after a while, and then I finally met Mark, and I started doing music for him, for his radio play. And then that helped me learn a lot. And Mark and I kind of worked backwards, where he learned music theory first and then kind of started doing what he wanted to after, and I started doing what I wanted to first, and now I'm kind of having to learn some music theory. That's why some of my stuff lately has been bangers, Marcus, because I've actually been learning music
get
theory.
It now,
because I'm just like, because the song where I think it really clicked recently was Voyage of the Kraken.
So good.
I was like, you know what? I want to try and like really like get like some music theory down and figure stuff out. And then when I did that song, I was just like, did I make fire? And so it was in every sense of the word a pirate metal song that I've always wanted to do. And it was a lot of fun. And so
everyone here should go buy Austin's albums. Please.
On Bandcamp, where can they buy your albums?
Amtrax91.bandcamp.com, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think. Let me look. I gotta check.
He has something upwards of 60 songs on there. So there's
I think I've topped 80 songs, and you can get all of them for if you get the digital discography, you can get all of them for 50% off right now.
Amtrax91.bandcamp.com, y'all.
Yep. I will sit here and sing Austin's musical praises till the day I die.
Before you do that, can I say what my favorite song of yours is?
Sure.
I really like your cover of Still Alive from Mirror's Edge. I know that it's like one of those things you're just like, I cringe going back and listening.
Oh, not
to
at
that.
all, actually.
Oh, okay, good.
That is like, one of my favorite remixes that I've ever done, and I'm still salty I didn't win the remix competition. But
I never skip it when it comes up on my phone, because I'm just like, I love it. It makes me so happy.
We have someone in chat, by the way, that wants to play drums on your next pirate metal track.
You're going to have to fight me for it, because I actually do play drums too.
Uh-oh. It's a drum off, ladies and gentlemen. It's a drum off.
Drum battle. But yeah, Austin, when I first met Austin, we had this like back and forth about like, oh, you do voices? Oh, you do voices? Oh, that's cool. And then we were fortunate enough to actually work together. So we spent a lot of time together. And I think I must have caught you just diddling around one day at your laptop, and I was like, are you making music? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, can I hear it? And you're like, yeah. And cut to 3 or 4 months later, I was like, hey, so I want you to make music for my radio play. And some of the stuff that he did for this radio play I did, called Mass Effect Protocol. Some of the music Austin did for that is incredible. Sadly there's stuff that he wrote for scenes that no one has heard yet and might never hear, that like I get torn up hearing it because I know what it's relating to. But it's so emotional. Even
I know there's one in particular that you really like really want to use.
Yep. Anyway,
my world is music. I do publicity for composers and songwriters in film and television. So you guys have my email.
Okay.
A couple of questions coming in from chat. What are your dream roles you'd love to VO for? Can either be a specific character, genre, or even video game anime. Say, I've always wanted to be in Pokemon or whatever.
It is difficult to answer this one because there are people who are just like, you can't say that you have a dream role anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's begging, and I'm like, it's not begging. I just have aspirations.
It's goals. Hashtag goals.
Here's I have a list. I have a voice actor bucket list of things that I want to do.
Yes.
And
you're like, and I have it right here.
Well, I have it up here, actually. It's like the one thing I remember, that and my name. But I will say, like, the top three, I would love to be in anything Digimon, just anything, period. I want to be in a fighting game where I can beat up myself, as in 1 or 2 characters, where I can just fight myself. And 3, I want to be in something with Austin on like an official capacity. And that might seem like pandering because he's here, but like it's legitimately in my top 3. Protocol doesn't count.
I'm talking about Megaton Girl, dingus.
Okay, well, something that neither one of us
that we didn't make ourselves. Like, okay,
yeah,
so we didn't make, yeah. Yeah. I echo that last statement. My big one right now, since somebody put it on the table, was I want to be in death battle with you. I want to fight you in a death battle.
There's a lot of people in death battle that I want to fight.
Yeah, but you specifically, like, I really want to like have you and me go at it, and I want you to win.
See, that's the thing though, is that like I would feel really bad. There's a lot of people that if I fought them in death battle and won, I'd be like, no, you were supposed to win.
Next question from chat. Mark, have you ever felt like you had to suppress your identity in order to work in an industry that has sometimes struggled with diversity?
Yes. That's a very, very deep question that has a lot of emotions attached to it. There were a number of years where the only kinds of roles that I was getting in my inbox to audition for were Black characters who were gangsters and drug dealers and, you know, to sound like a 1950s dad, hoodlums. Basically very stereotypical roles that I'm never going to book. That's just not my lived experience. There are plenty of actors out there who can rock those characters. I'm not one of them. That's just not a strength of mine. And so unfortunately, it seemed to be that a couple of studios that I had a long-term relationship with prior to this moment suddenly decided that the only things that I could read for were Black characters. And because I couldn't play those characters well, I was never booking those, which meant I was never booking, which meant I was never working. And then you jumped forward a couple of years and I had a little bit of difficulty convincing people that I was Black. So that there were a couple of Black characters that came up that I was like, I can play that character. And they were like, why would you play that character? And I'm like, you know, so it's an ongoing struggle, I think. There's always been this sort of idea of what Black sounds like in media. And it's something that's really difficult to fight. But it is something that I just keep working at. I've met a lot of people over the years who have done a phenomenal job of helping to try and change people's minds in that regard. People like, Bill Butts, Mark Swint. There's quite a few people who have made sacrifices in their own careers as well to try and change the mentality and how these things are approached. So we're definitely moving forward, but it is one of those things that has come up, and it will probably come up again. It's kind of just something that I don't want to say I've grown used to, but I've grown comfortable with the fight now. that I'm confident in speaking up when that comes up, when something like that happens.
Well, thank you for the answer, and thank you for the question. Let's see. This is Shalom Froggy's mom.
Oh, Shalom, yeah.
Shalom Froggy's mom. Yeah, I guess just on that topic, I'm just curious because you guys are working behind the scenes. What kind of diversity do you see amongst your players? Are you typically alone and you're not seeing other voiceover actors in your gigs?
I'm not sure I
understand the question.
The question being is do you see kind of diversity behind the microphone, so to speak, in your jobs? But I realized in the question that perhaps you're just going in solo, so you're not actually seeing the other actors that are doing these roles.
Especially right now, we're all kind of recording from home by ourselves, so you don't necessarily get to see who you're recording with. But I'm very fortunate in that oftentimes I get to see who else is going to work on a project that I'm working on. So I at least get to know the names of people who are in stuff that I'm in. Or you discover, when a cast list is announced, you get to go, oh, that's who's playing so and so, and so you can connect and kind of meet people that way. As far as diversity goes, I mean, there's tons of diversity in voiceover. The barrier of entry, though, is that auditions don't always go out in a fair and equal way. A lot of casting directors will only send to their favorites, or may even avoid auditions altogether and just cast someone that they know. So there's plenty of people out there who just don't ever get an opportunity to show what they can do because they never even get the opportunity to audition for stuff. So that can be a pretty big barrier for people, and why I think we see such a lack of diversity from the public perspective, because when you only see the same 5 LGBTQ plus actors announcing work, you must assume then that those are the only ones in the industry, when in reality it's just that other people aren't even being given the opportunities to go for those characters.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's a lot of uncredited or additional voice roles out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously everybody wants to see more inclusivity for named roles, but I do agree that there are probably more people out there working than you can actually see. The way I can relate is in my world of composers and whatever, there's a very strong lack of women composers visible, but there's plenty working in the industry. So I just really want to move on to a fun question now because it came up and I feel bad that I missed it. It was from a while ago. Whip of Alchemy asked, what is your favorite 80s song? For AD's song.
Favorite 80s song?
Probably Take On Me by the Ahas.
Mm-hmm. The Ahas.
Mm-hmm. Just take it. Don't question it.
Yeah. What flies to your mind? It could be hair metal.
I am going to say probably the Dragon Warrior theme song. I know it counts. It counts, I swear. It's from the 80s.
It is technically from the 80s.
But yeah, I always love the bump. There's just something so just like oh yeah, I'm going on an adventure.
Yeah.
Like I love that song. I've always wanted to cover it.
You should. With pirate
nothing
metal.
is stopping me. Literally nothing is stopping me.
You've got a drummer in set that's ready to go.
Begin your dream.
Well, unless chat has any more questions for these two amazing guys, I am going to wrap up our stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us at Qweerty Gamers. And yeah, I love hearing about your experiences in voiceover, your tips and tricks, vocal care and whatnot. Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, everybody that's tuned in, thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to follow Qweerty Gamers on our social media channels and join our Discord to learn about future Q&As coming up. They happen typically on Tuesdays at 7 p.m., not necessarily weekly, but yeah, follow our socials, join us in Discord, become a part of the Qweerty family, and you get to see more of this amazing stuff. And now we're going to be rating somebody, so please stay in chat. We want to go and support a fellow streamer, probably LGBTQ streamer. So please stay in chat. We're going to go raid them, give them some Qweerty love, and we'll see you next time.
Deuces.